Hour 0. Beijing announces a special military operation to enforce Chinese sovereignty over Taiwan. It is not a declaration of war, it is a legal framing, deliberately chosen, designed to create ambiguity about whether what is happening constitutes an act of aggression requiring a military response or a sovereignty assertion requiring a diplomatic one. The framing buys China time. In the first hours after the announcement, every government in the world is asking the same question. Is this real or is this another exercise? It is real, and the United States Navy is already moving. This is the hour-by-hour account of how the U.S. Navy would actually defend Taiwan. Not the version that sounds good in a press release, the version built from the CSIS first battle of the next war game, played 24 times with results that were sobering even for the most optimistic American analysts. The version informed by the AEI China-Taiwan tracking reports that document what China commissioned in 2025 and what it is building now. The version shaped by the operational lessons of Operation Epic Fury, which demonstrated in real combat what American naval power can do and what it costs to do it. And the version that the Navy's own distributed maritime operations doctrine is designed to execute against exactly this scenario. The honest version, including the losses. The USS George Washington is at Yokosuka, the only carrier immediately available in the Pacific, while 3 carriers remain committed to Epic Fury operations in the Middle East. Its strike group includes approximately 6 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and the associated escorts. Carrier Air Wing 5 is aboard, F/A-18E/F, Super Hornets, and F-35Cs, EA-18G Growlers, E-2D Hawkeyes, MH-60 helicopters. The George Washington is the anchor of American deterrence in the Pacific right now. 1 carrier. Against a People's Liberation Army Navy that commissioned 16 surface combatants in 2025 alone, with a combined tonnage larger than any American carrier strike group, and a combined armament of 752 vertical launch cells. Before the Navy moves a single ship, the undersea piece is already in place. Virginia-class fast attack submarines have been conducting intelligence collection and pre-positioning operations in the Western Pacific continuously. Their locations are not public, their patrol patterns are classified. But the Navy's doctrine of forward submarine presence, maintained through decades of Cold War practice and refined through every subsequent operational environment, ensures that American submarines are in position before any surface ship crosses the first island chain. The submarine is the first mover in any Taiwan contingency. It will be the last thing China's Navy worries about, and the first thing that kills it. Hour 1 through Hour 6, the opening of a Chinese Taiwan operation begins not with amphibious ships, but with missiles. The PLA rocket force activates. Ballistic and cruise missile strikes target Taiwanese military infrastructure, American bases in the region, and the sensor and communications networks that Taiwan depends on for command and control. Andersen Air Force Base on Guam, the primary American air hub in the Western Pacific, approximately 2,700 kilometers from Taiwan, is struck. The CSIS wargame found that 90% of Allied aircraft was destroyed on the ground by Chinese missile attacks in the opening phase of every scenario played. The aircraft that do not disperse before Chinese missiles arrive are the aircraft that will not fly. Kadena Air Base in Okinawa is struck. Clark Air Base in the Philippines is struck. American forward presence in the region, concentrated at air bases that Chinese planners have spent decades identifying and targeting, is hammered in the opening minutes. Taiwan's own air defense network activates. 4 PAC, 3 Patriot battalions fielded by the end of 2025. NASAMS Air Defense Systems. Tianqian, 2 surface-to-air missiles deployed in mobile batteries across the island. The Xiongfeng 3 supersonic anti-ship missile, with an extended-range variant capable of engaging targets at 400 kilometers, begins engaging planned surface ships that have moved into the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan's seven-tiered defense strategy, built around engaging a Chinese invasion force at multiple ranges from blue water engagement at 200 kilometers down to beach defense, is activated at every tier simultaneously. The Republic of China Navy, smaller than the PLAN but fighting in home waters it knows intimately, sorties what ships it can before PLAN missile strikes close the ports. Missile corvettes armed with Xiongfeng 2 anti-ship missiles, small attack craft, and the new indigenous submarine Haikun, Taiwan's first domestically built diesel-electric attack submarine, commissioned in 2025 after years of development, moves to its patrol position in the shallow, acoustically complex waters of the Taiwan Strait. Diesel submarines in their home waters are not easy targets, even for the most capable anti-submarine warfare forces. The Haikun and its sister boats, if additional production proceeds, represent one of Taiwan's most viable asymmetric options. A single torpedo from a submarine that the plan cannot find can sink an amphibious ship carrying a battalion of troops. The deterrent value is real even if the numbers are small. Hour 6 through hour 24. The critical decision window opens for Washington. The President and the National Security Council are receiving intelligence assessments, military options, and alliance consultations simultaneously. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi stated in November 2025 that a Chinese blockade of Taiwan would constitute a threat to Japan's survival, requiring mobilization of the Japanese Self-Defense Force. Whether Japan activates that commitment in the first 24 hours of a Chinese Taiwan operation, or whether it takes days of diplomatic consultation and national diet deliberation, matters enormously for what the U.S. Navy can do and where it can do it. American operations conducted from Japanese bases dramatically expand the geographic coverage and reduce the transit times for strike aircraft. Operations conducted entirely from carrier decks and from Guam are possible but constrained by range and sortie rate limitations that Japanese base access would eliminate. The USS George Washington receives its orders. The strike group is ordered to close with Taiwan. From Yokosuka, the distance to a tactically useful operating position east of Taiwan is approximately 1,000 kilometers, roughly 2 days of high-speed transit. During those 2 days, the George Washington and its escorts are operating within the engagement envelope of PLA Rocket Force DF, 26 intermediate-range ballistic missiles, which have a range exceeding 4,000 kilometers. The DF-26 was specifically described by Chinese military publications as capable of targeting American aircraft carriers. The DF-21D, with a range of approximately 1,500 kilometers, covers the western approaches to Taiwan. A carrier transiting from Yokosuka to a position east of Taiwan passes through the DF-26 engagement zone for the entire duration of the transit. The American response to the ballistic missile threat during the transit has 3 simultaneous components. First, American submarines already positioned along the transit route begin attacking the land-based DF-26 launch vehicle units that are most immediately threatening. The DF-26 is a road-mobile system that launchers vehicles move to pre-surveyed firing positions before launch. Finding and destroying those vehicles before they fire requires current intelligence on their positions, fast-moving strike assets to reach them, and the willingness to strike targets on the Chinese mainland. Striking mainland China is a profound escalation. It is also, according to the CSIS wargame, one of the necessary conditions for preventing the loss of American carriers in the first days of the conflict. The wargame found that typically the United States lost both forward-deployed carriers within the first turn or two when Chinese long-range missile strikes were allowed to operate without being suppressed. 4 critical conditions were identified for preventing Chinese success. Taiwan must resist. The U.S. must intervene immediately. The U.S. must conduct military operations from Japan, and the U.S. must have adequate supplies of anti-ship missiles. All 4 conditions are currently stressed. Second, Typhon ground-launched Tomahawk batteries deployed on Luzon in the northern Philippines engage planned surface ships that are advancing in the Luzon Strait and the South China Sea approaches to Taiwan. The Typhon battery gives the United States a land-based long-range strike capability that does not require carrier aviation to close with the threat. A Tomahawk fired from Luzon can reach targets throughout the South China Sea and the eastern Taiwan Strait without exposing American aircraft or ships to the worst of the plan's defensive fire. The Typhon battery deployed to the Philippines in 2024 was the first ground-based intermediate-range strike capability the United States has positioned in the Indo-Pacific since the INF Treaty, and its operational debut in a Taiwan contingency would represent one of the most consequential first uses of a ground-based missile system since Desert Storm. Third, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, launched from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri on the same 18-plus-hour flight profile that they flew to Iran, carrying long-range anti-ship missiles, begin engaging planned surface ships in the Taiwan Strait and the approaches to the island. The LRASM, a stealth anti-ship cruise missile with a range exceeding 800 kilometers, can be launched by B-2S from positions far outside the plan's defensive air cover, giving the bombers the ability to strike planned amphibious ships, destroyers, and logistics vessels without flying into the dense anti-aircraft environment that surrounds the plan's carrier groups. The CSIS wargame identified heavy bombers wielding long-range anti-ship cruise missiles as key instruments for the Pentagon in the Taiwan scenario. The problem identified by CSIS is that the number of LRASMs available is fewer than 500 in 2026. Against a planned amphibious force of hundreds of ships, 500 LRASMs is not enough to sink everything that needs to be sunk to stop an invasion. Hour 24 through Hour 72. The George Washington arrives in the Philippine Sea east of Taiwan. Its position, approximately 500 kilometers east of the island, places it at the outer edge of the DF-21D engagement envelope, but within the DF-26's range. The carrier's air wing begins generating sorties toward Taiwan. F-35Cs, with their fifth-generation stealth and sensor fusion capability, can operate in the degraded air defense environment that Taiwanese and American strikes on Chinese air defense infrastructure have created, providing close air support to Taiwanese ground forces and striking planned amphibious ships that have closed within the island's coastal waters. EEA, 18G Growlers provide electronic attack support that suppresses Chinese radar and communications. E-2D Hawkeyes provide the airborne battle management picture that allows the air wing to operate effectively in the complex air environment around Taiwan, where Taiwanese, American, and Chinese aircraft are all operating simultaneously. The submarine battle is the decisive contest of these 72 hours. American fast attack submarines are engaging the planned submarine force that is trying to track and target the George Washington, attempting to prevent the carrier from operating effectively by threatening it with undersea attack. Virginia-class boats are simultaneously attacking planned surface ships in the Taiwan Strait, particularly the amphibious ships carrying the troops and vehicles of the PLA Eastern Theater Command's assault forces. Each amphibious ship sunk is a battalion of troops that does not land on Taiwan. Each destroyer sunk is a ship that cannot protect the amphibious force from Taiwanese missile boats and torpedo attacks. The CSIS wargame found that the base case results in Chinese naval losses of 138 ships, which prevents a successful amphibious invasion. But achieving those losses requires adequate supplies of anti-ship missiles, American submarine freedom of maneuver in the Taiwan Strait despite planned mining operations, and sustained air superiority sufficient to prevent Chinese aircraft from establishing the air cover that the amphibious force requires. Taiwan's own forces are fighting at maximum intensity throughout this period. The $40 billion Special Asymmetric Warfare Budget, announced by President Lai Ching-te in November 2025, the largest special defense budget in Taiwanese history, funded the precision artillery, long-range precision strike munitions, anti-aircraft and anti-tank missiles, unmanned aerial and surface vehicles, and AI-assisted command and control systems that Taiwan needs to hold out during the period between the invasion's beginning and the arrival of American forces in sufficient strength to turn the tide. HIMARS systems, 57 of them as of August 2025, are firing Army tactical missile system rounds at planned ports of embarkation on the Chinese coast, disrupting the logistics that sustain the invasion force. Xiongfeng 3 anti-ship missiles are engaging planned surface combatants. Taiwanese Haifeng Brigade shore-based maritime strike forces are coordinating with the Republic of China Navy's remaining surface forces and the Haikun submarine to create overlapping fields of fire that the plan's amphibious ships must transit to reach the beaches. The honest assessment of these 72 hours, drawn from the CSIS wargame's 24 iterations, is that American and Allied forces can prevent China from successfully occupying Taiwan, but at a cost that would shock the American public. The CSIS base case projects United States losses of 10 to 20 warships, 2 aircraft carriers, 200 to 400 warplanes, and 3,000 or more American troops killed in 3 weeks of fighting. 2 aircraft carriers. That is not a talking point or an alarmist projection. That is the median outcome of a rigorous war game conducted by respected analysts who played the scenario 24 times and found consistent results. The cost of defending Taiwan is paid in American blood and American ships, not just in American treasure. Whether those costs are acceptable depends on a political judgment that is not within the scope of military analysis. What military analysis can say is that the outcome is not predetermined. Taiwan can be defended. The plan's amphibious force can be destroyed before it successfully occupies the island. But the conditions that make that outcome achievable are specific, demanding, and currently stressed by the epic fury commitment in the Middle East. Taiwan must fight. The U.S. must intervene immediately. Japan must provide base access. American long-range strike capacity must be adequate, and the submarine force must be available in sufficient numbers and with sufficient freedom of maneuver. Of those 4 conditions, all 4 are currently under pressure. Taiwan is building the capability to fight, but the special budget faces political opposition from the KMT and the Taiwan People's Party that could delay its full implementation. American immediate intervention is complicated by the Middle East commitment that has reduced Pacific carrier presence to a single ship. Japanese base access requires political decisions that take time even when the strategic logic is clear. And the long-range strike inventory, depleted by 6 weeks of epic fury operations, will take years to fully reconstitute at current production rates. The Navy knows this. It is planning for it. The Distributed Maritime Operations Doctrine, which calls for dispersing American naval forces across a wide geographic area to complicate Chinese targeting while maintaining the ability to concentrate firepower at decisive points, is designed precisely for the Taiwan scenario where planned ballistic missiles threaten concentrated carrier groups. The investments in autonomous systems, directed energy, and affordable long-range munitions are all driven partly by the Taiwan scenario's specific demands. The Typhon batteries in the Philippines, the LRASM production ramp, the Virginia-class production increase, the AUKUS submarine commitment, all of these are Taiwan scenario-driven decisions even when they are not described in those terms publicly. Hour 0 is the hour when everything that has been invested, planned, and positioned either proves adequate or doesn't. The Navy will fight. The sailors aboard the George Washington Strike Group, the submarine crews already in position, the JMSDF officers who have trained alongside American counterparts for decades, the Taiwanese military that has spent 30 years preparing for this moment. They will fight. The question is whether the political decisions, the industrial investments, and the strategic commitments that determine whether they fight with adequate resources will have been made in time. The Navy is ready for Hour 0. The question is whether everyone else is. If you want to understand the specific capability investments the Navy is making to improve the Taiwan scenario's odds, how the Distributed Maritime Operations Doctrine changes the carrier's role in a contested Pacific environment, and what the combination of AUKUS submarines and Typhon batteries means for the first island chain defense, subscribe to Navy Power Decoded. Every video goes deeper than the headlines. Hour zero is closer than most people think, and the Navy is already there. The 4 critical conditions for American success in a Taiwan defense are the analytical framework that matters most. But there is a 5th condition that the war game did not fully capture and that the operational lessons of Epic Fury have made more visible. The condition of institutional readiness, the condition of having done this before. Epic Fury demonstrated something that no amount of planning and wargaming can produce on its own. The institutional knowledge of how to actually execute sustained multi-domain combat operations at scale against an adversary with genuine military capability over an extended period. The officers who planned Epic Fury's targeting, who coordinated the carrier aviation and the submarine fires and the electronic warfare and the cyber operations, who managed the logistics of sustaining 3 carrier strike groups at combat tempo for weeks, learned things that no exercise can teach. They learned under fire with real consequences against a real adversary. That institutional knowledge is now embedded in the operational community that would plan and execute a Taiwan defense. China's PLA, which has not fought a major combat operation since the 1979 border war with Vietnam, does not have that institutional knowledge. The CSIS wargames finding that China is unlikely to succeed in occupying Taiwan reflects partly the material balance and partly the operational experience gap. The PLA has been modernizing rapidly and has been learning from observation of every conflict it can study. But learning by observation and learning by doing are different things. American naval officers who planned Epic Fury know things about joint targeting, about logistics under fire, about the friction and fog of actual combat, that Chinese officers who studied Epic Fury from a distance cannot fully replicate. That advantage is real. It is not permanent. Every year that the PLA modernizes and trains and exercises, the experience gap narrows. Every year that American operations provide the lived operational experience that no exercise can replicate, the gap remains. The pace of Chinese military development is accelerating. The pace of American operational engagement is determined by events and by strategic choices that are not entirely within America's control. But the institutional knowledge advantage that Epic Fury has sharpened is part of the answer to the question of whether the U.S. Navy can actually defend Taiwan. Hour zero is the test of all of it: the platforms, the weapons, the doctrine, the alliances, the industrial base, the institutional knowledge. When that hour comes, if it comes, the outcome will be determined by the accumulation of every decision made in the years that preceded it. The Navy is making those decisions now. So is China. So are Japan and Taiwan and Australia and every government that has a stake in the outcome. The Navy is ready for hour zero. Everything else is the question.